Zibdab the Grook was an odd little fellow. His hair was bright orange, his ears were both yellow. His nose was as red as a box for the mail. His eyes were on stalks, like the eyes of a snail. His smile was the strangest thing you've ever seen. Most people have pink lips, but Zibdab's were green. His body was round, and his arms were so long that his hands touched the ground as he ambled along on feet like an elephant's, chunky and flat. He couldn't wear shoes. He did wear a hat, a big one, so big he could pull it right down to cover his face when he went into town. So there we have Zibdab. And as you will agree, he wasn't the prettiest sight you could see, but animals loved him. Each dog and each cat would beg to be stroked by this Grook in a hat. They'd wag, and they'd purr, and not leave him alone. He'd give them a cuddle, some fish, or a bone. He'd tell them how loved and how lovely they were, and talk of his dreams as he ruffled their fur. But people, people, they seemed to know less than the animals Zibdab would comfort and bless. They laughed at him, sneered at him, pointed and mocked. But Zibdab kept smiling. He couldn't be shocked. He'd look in the mirror and have to agree that he wasn't the prettiest sight you could see. One cold winter's night, when the world was asleep, the snow fell and grew ever so deep, and early next morning by Zibdab's front door stood 35 children. It may have been more, determined to wait for as long as it took. They'd come to throw snowballs at Zibdab the Grook. Then one of the children cried, "Look what I've found," and pointed excitedly down at the ground. For there, on the snow, were the chunky and flat, unmistakable tracks of a Grook in a hat. They followed the footprints and chanted with glee till they came to the cornfield of Farmer McPhee, where, off in a corner, beside a small brook, building a snowman, stood Zibdab the Grook. 35 children, it may have been more, chanting much louder than ever before, ran towards Zibdab, their hands full of snow. They gathered around him and let it all go. He laughed as a snowball knocked off his big hat, smiled as 6 children then trampled it flat, giggled as snow landed splunk in his hair. Then everything stopped as a noise filled the air. Up in the sky, coming down to the ground, was a huge flying saucer, all shiny and round, with purple lamps flashing a twinkly glow. It landed beside them, just touching the snow. Then out stepped a robot with lights in his head. He looked at the children and solemnly said, "I've come to give someone a lovely surprise. A ride in our spaceship, way up to the skies, the treat of a lifetime. It's bound to be fun, but sorry to say we can only take one. Sit down, all the children who shout and complain, who laugh to see others in trouble or pain. Sit down, all the children who try to be boss and think it's okay to be grumpy and cross." The children all sniggered and shuffled with shame, till one squatted down, and 2 more did the same. Then so many sat that the ground fairly shook, and the only one standing was Zibdab the Grook. He walked to the spaceship, and what was inside? 100 big Grooks, with their arms open wide. They gathered him close as their ship left the ground, where 35 children sat huddled around. The Grooks all discussed it, and had to agree Zibdab was the prettiest sight you could see. They flew over London, then Paris, then Rome, then shot into space, taking Zibdab